The Nature of the Psyche by Jane Roberts. Chapter 3. Association, the Emotions, and a Different Frame of Reference. You normally organize your experience in terms of time. Your usual stream of consciousness is also highly associative. However, certain events in the present will remind you of past ones, for example, and sometimes your memory of the past will color present events. Association or no, physically, you will remember events in time, with present moments neatly following past ones. The psyche deals largely with associative processes. However, as it organizes events through association, time as such has little meaning in that framework. Associations are tied together, so to speak, by emotional experience. In a large manner, the emotions defy time. When you are in touch with your psyche, you experience direct knowledge. Direct knowledge is comprehension. When you are dreaming, you are experiencing direct knowledge about yourself or about the world. You are comprehending your own being in a different way. When you are reading a book, you are experiencing indirect knowledge that may or may not lead to comprehension. Comprehension itself exists whether or not you have the words or even the thoughts to express it. You may comprehend the meaning of a dream without understanding it at all in verbal terms. Your ordinary thoughts may falter or slip and slide around your inner comprehension without ever coming close to expressing it. Dreams deal with associations and with emotional validities that often do not seem to make sense in the usual world. I said before that no one can really give you a definition of the psyche. It must be experienced, since its activities, wisdom, and perception rise largely from another kind of reference. Then you must often learn to interpret your encounter with the psyche to your usual self. One of the largest difficulties here is the issue of organization. In regular life, you organize your experience very neatly and push it into accepted patterns or channels, into preconceived ideas and beliefs. You tailor it to fit time sequences. Again, the psyche's organization follows no such learned predisposition. Its products can often appear chaotic simply because they splash over your accepted ideas about what experience is. In Seth Speaks, I tried to describe certain extensions of your own reality in terms that my readers could understand. In The Nature of Personal Reality, I tried to extend the practical boundaries of individual experience as it is usually experienced. I tried to give the reader hints that would increase practical, spiritual, and physical enjoyment and fulfillment in daily life. Those books were dictated by me in a more or less straight narrative style. In Unknown Reality, I went further, showing how the experiences of the psyche splash outward into the daylight, so to speak. Hopefully, in that book, through my dictation and through Rupert and Joseph's experiences, the reader could see the greater dimensions that touch ordinary living and sense the psyche's magic. That book required much more work on Joseph's part, and that additional effort itself was a demonstration that the psyche's events are very difficult to pin down in time. Seemingly, its action goes out in all directions. It may be easier to say, for example, this or that event began at such a time and ended later at such and such a time. As Joseph did his notes, however, it became apparent that some events could hardly be so pinpointed, and indeed seemed to have no beginning or end. Because you tie your experience so directly to time, you rarely allow yourself any experiences, except in dreams, that seem to defy it. Your ideas about the psyche therefore limit your experience of it. Rupert is far more lenient than most of my readers in that regard. Still, he often expects his own rather unorthodox experiences to appear in the kind of orderly garb with which you are all familiar. In our last book session, I gave the title for this chapter, mentioning the emotions and association, and the fact that the psyche must be directly experienced. I have not dictated a book session, per se, again until this evening. In the meantime, Rupert has been experiencing dimensions of the psyche new to him. It did not occur to him that those experiences had anything to do with this book, or that, in acting so spontaneously, he was following any kind of inner order. He wanted these pages to follow neatly, one by one. Each of his experiences, however, demonstrates the ways in which the psyche's direct experiences defy your prosaic concepts of time, reality, and the orderly sequence of events. They also serve to point out the differences between knowledge and comprehension, and emphasize the importance of desire and of the emotions. In a way, of course, my own experience is divorced from that of my readers. As this information, the Seth material, is sifted through Rupert's experience, you are able to see how it applies to the existence that is presently yours. Rupert's experiences of late are particularly important in that by implication they run counter to many accepted core beliefs that are generally held. We will use these latest episodes as an opportunity to discuss the presence of knowledge that appears to be supernormal, available, but usually untouched. We will further describe the triggers that can make such information practical or bring it into the practical range. First of all, there are several points I want to make. You are born with the inclination toward language. Language is implied in your physical structure. You are born with the inclination to learn and to explore. When you are conceived, there is already a complete pattern for your grown physical body, a pattern that is definite enough to give you the recognizable kind of adult form, while variable enough to allow for literally infinite variations. It would be idiotic of you to say that you were forced to become an adult, however. For one thing, at any given time, you could end the process, and many do. In other words, because the pattern for development exists in your terms, this does not mean that each such development is not unique. In your terms again, then, at any one earth time, many such patterns exist. In greater respects, however, all time is simultaneous, and so all such physical patterns exist at once. In the psychic areas, all patterns for knowledge, cultures, civilizations, personal and mass accomplishments. Let me start this sentence again. In the psychic areas, all patterns for knowledge, cultures, civilizations, personal and mass accomplishments, sciences, religions, technologies, and arts exist in the same fashion. The private psyche, the part of you that you do not recognize, is aware of those patterns, even as it is aware of private, physical, biological patterns about which it forms your image. Certain leanings, inclinations, and probabilities are present in your biological structure to be triggered or not according to your purposes and intents. You may personally have the ability to be a fine athlete, for example, yet your inclinations and intents may carry you in a different direction so that the necessary triggers are not activated. Each individual is gifted in a variety of ways. His or her own desires and beliefs activate certain abilities and ignore others. The human species has built into it all the knowledge, information, and data that it can possibly need under any and all conditions. This heritage must be triggered psychically, however, as a physical mechanism such as music is triggered through desire or intent. This does not mean that you learn what, in larger terms, you already know, as for example, if you learn a skill. Without the triggering desire, the skill would not be developed. But even when you do learn a skill, you use it in your own unique way. Still, the knowledge of mathematics and the arts is as much within you as your genes are within you. You usually believe that all such information must come from outside of yourself, however. Certain mathematical formulae are not imprinted in the brain, yet they are inherent in the structure of the brain and implied within its existence. Your own focus determines the information that is available to you. I will here give you an example. Rupert paints as a hobby. Sometimes he paints for fairly long periods of time, then forgets about it. Joseph is an artist. Rupert has been wondering about the contents of the mind, curious as to what information was available to it. The Christmas holidays were approaching, and he asked Joseph what he would like for a gift, and Joseph more or less replied, "A book on Cézanne." Rupert's love for Joseph and his own purposes and his growing questions, along with his interest in painting in general, triggered exactly the kind of stimulus that broke through conventional beliefs about time and knowledge. Rupert tuned into Cézanne's worldview. He did not contact Cézanne per se, but Cézanne's comprehension of painting as an art. Rupert is not technically facile enough to even follow Cézanne's directions. Joseph is facile enough, but he would not want to follow the vision of another. The information, however, is extremely valuable, and knowledge on any kind of subject is available in just such a manner, but it is attained through desire and through intent. This does not mean that any person spontaneously, with no instruction, can suddenly become a great artist or writer or scientist. It does mean, however, that the species possesses within itself those inclinations which will flower. It means also that you are limiting the range of your knowledge by not taking advantage of such methods. It does not mean that in your own terms all knowledge already exists either. For knowledge automatically becomes individualized as you receive it, and hence new. Your desire automatically attracts the kind of information you require, though you may or may not be aware of it. If you are gifted and want to be a musician, for example, then you may literally learn while you are asleep, tuning into the worldviews of other musicians, both alive and dead, in your own terms. When you are awake, you will receive inner hints, nudges, or inspirations. You may still need to practice, but your practice will largely be in joy and will not take as long as it might others. The reception of such information facilitates skill and operates basically outside of time sequences. Rupert's Cézanne material, therefore, comes very quickly, taking a bare portion of the day. Yet its quality is such that professional art critics could learn from it, though some of their productions might take much longer periods of time and result from an extensive conscious knowledge of art, which Rupert almost entirely lacks. The productions of the psyche, by their nature, therefore, burst aside many most cherished beliefs. It seems almost heresy to suppose that such knowledge is available, for then what is the use of education? Yet education should serve to introduce the student to as many fields of endeavor as possible, so that he or she might recognize those that serve as natural triggers, opening skills or further development. The student will then pick and choose. The Cézanne material was from the past, yet future knowledge is quite accessible. Let me read that sentence again. The Cézanne material was from the past, yet future knowledge is quite as accessible. There are, of course, probable futures from the standpoint of your past. Future information is theoretically available there, just as the body's future pattern of development was at your birth. And that certainly was practical. There are then other ways of receiving information than those that you take for granted. There are other kinds of knowledge also. These deal with organizations with which you generally are not familiar. It is not merely a matter of learning new methods to acquire knowledge, then, but a situation in which old methods must be momentarily set aside, along with the type of knowledge that is associated with them. It's not a matter either of there simply being one other category of knowledge, for there are numerous other such categories, many of them biologically within your reach. Various so-called esoteric traditions provide certain methods that allow an individual to set aside accepted modes of perception and offer patterns that may be used as containers for these other kinds of knowledge. Even these containers must necessarily shape the information received, however. Some such methods are very advantageous, yet they have also become too rigid and autocratic, allowing little room for deviation. Dogmas are then set up about them so that only a certain body of data is considered acceptable. The systems no longer have the flexibility that first gave them birth. The kind of knowledge upon which you depend needs verbalization. It's very difficult for you to consider the accumulation of any kind of knowledge without the use of language as you understand it. Even your remembered dreams are often verbalized constructs. You may use images, but these are familiar images, born of the educated and hence prejudiced physical perceptions. Those remembered dreams have meaning and are valuable, but they are already organized for you to some extent and put into a shape that you can somewhat recognize. Beneath those levels, however, you comprehend events in an entirely different fashion. These whole comprehensions are then packaged, even in the dream state, and translated into usual sense terms. Any information or knowledge must have a pattern if you are going to understand it at all. Rupert's own painting, his knowledge of psychic abilities, his love for Joseph, all served to form a pattern which then attracted the Cézanne material. He received this automatically, writing down the words that came almost too quickly for him to follow. His craft or art of writing brought the material to clear focus. The information itself, however, had nothing to do with words, but with an overall comprehension of the nature of painting, a direct knowing. Rupert used its own abilities as a container then. This kind of knowledge is available again on any subject to anyone who provides a suitable pattern through desire, love, intent, or belief. Rupert wondered later, if I dreamed, my own usual state of consciousness is far different from yours. I do not alternate between waking and sleeping as you do. Still, I have states of consciousness that could be compared to your dream state in that I am not as involved in them as I am in others. If I said to you, I control my dream state, you might have an idea of what I mean, yet I do not control my dreams. I fulfill them. What you could call my dreaming state is involved with the levels I spoke of that exist beneath your remembered dreams. I said earlier that there were many different kinds of knowledge. Think of them instead as states of knowledge. Perception of any of these takes a conscious, attuned consciousness. Perception of any of these takes a consciousness attuned to each. In my waking condition, I operate at many levels of consciousness at once and deal therefore with different systems of knowledge. In my dream condition, or rather conditions, I form links of consciousness that combine these various systems, creatively forming them into new versions. Waking again, I become consciously aware of those activities and use them to add to the dimensions of my usual state, creatively expanding my experience of reality. Let me read that sentence again. That seems important. Waking again, I become consciously aware of those activities and use them to add to the dimensions of my usual state, creatively expanding my experience of reality. What I learn is transmitted automatically to others like me, and their knowledge is transmitted to me. We are each consciously aware of these transmissions. In the terms usually familiar to you, you think of the conscious mind. In those terms, there are many conscious minds. You are so prejudiced, however, that you ignore information that you have been taught cannot be conscious. All of your experience, therefore, is organized according to your beliefs. It is much more natural to remember your dreams than not to remember them. It is presently in vogue to say that the conscious mind, as you consider it, deals with survival. It deals with survival only insofar as it promotes survival in your particular kind of society. In those terms, if you remembered your dreams and if you benefited consciously from that knowledge, even your physical survival would be better assured. One level of dream life deals particularly with the biological condition of the body, giving you not just hints of health difficulties, but the reasons for them and the ways to circumvent them. Information about the probable future is also given to help you make conscious choices. You've taught yourself that you cannot be conscious in your dreams. However, because you interpret the word conscious so that it indicates only your own prejudiced concept, as a result, you do not have any culturally acceptable patterns that allow you to use your dreams competently. Trance states, daydreaming, hypnotism, these give you some hint of the various differences that can occur from the standpoint of waking consciousness. In each, reality appears in another fashion, and for that matter, different rules apply. In the dream state, far greater variations occur. The key to the dream state, however, lies in waking one as far as you are concerned. You must change your ideas about dreaming, alter your concepts about it before you begin to explore it. Otherwise, your own waking prejudice will close the door. As it is, you express very little of your entire personhood. My remark has nothing to do with your accepted concepts of unconscious portions of the self. Your ideas of the unconscious are so linked to your limited ideas of personhood as to be meaningless in this discussion. It is as if you used only one finger of one hand and then said, "This is the proper expression of my personhood." It is not just that there are other functions of the mind unused, but that in those terms you have other minds. You have one brain, it is true, but you allow it to use only one station, or to identify itself with only one mind of many. It seems evident to you that one person has one mind. You identify with the mind that you use. If you had another, then it would seem as if you must be someone else. A mind is a psychic pattern through which you interpret and form reality. You have physical limbs that you can see. You have minds that are invisible. Each one can organize reality in a different fashion. Each one deals with its own kind of knowledge. These minds all work together to keep you alive through the physical structure of the brain. When you use all of these minds, then and only then do you become fully aware of your surroundings. You perceive reality more clearly than you do now, more sharply, brilliantly, and concisely. At the same time, however, you comprehend it directly. You comprehend what is apart from your physical perception of it. You accept as yourself those other states of consciousness native to other minds. You achieve true personhood. In terms of history, some ancient races achieved such goals, but in your own terms, so long ago that you cannot find evidence of their knowledge. Throughout the centuries, various individuals have come close, yet had no vehicle of expression that would have enabled the members of the species to understand. They possessed methods, but the methods presupposed or necessitated a knowledge that others did not possess. Rupert's nearly forgotten dream last night represents a breakthrough in that he was at least consciously aware of receiving knowledge in yet another different fashion. He could not verbalize it, nor did he have a suitable pattern to contain it. He received it, however. His painting of late is no coincidence, for he is dealing with nonverbal information, organizing data in another way, and thus activating other portions of the mind. The Cézanne material, the dream, and the painting are all aspects of another kind of perception. Your joint library experiments helped set the stage as you added your encouragement. All of this will help Rupert toward a non-verbal comprehension that will, on another level, reorganize some of his beliefs. This type of perception cannot be described until he forms suitable verbal patterns that can come only with further experience. In this, I am a touchstone. He accelerates mentally to a certain degree, and that puts him in touch with me, an additional energy source. He activates certain portions of the brain that connected to the other mind that other people do not yet realize that they possess. You experience yourself in a certain way topside, so to speak, and so in order to take advantage of information at other levels of your awareness, you must learn to experience those other organizational systems with which you are usually unfamiliar. Often, the seeming meaninglessness of dreams is a result of your own ignorance of dream symbolism and organization. For example, you may also misinterpret revelatory material because you try to structure it in reference to your ordinary conscious organizations. Many valuable and quite practical insights that could be utilized go astray. Therefore, I am going to suggest then that some simple exercises that will allow you to directly experience the feel of your being in a different way. First of all, the various kinds of organizations used by the psyche can be compared, at one level at least, with different arts. Music is not better than the visual arts, for example. A sculpture cannot be compared with a musical note. I am not saying then that one mode of organization is better than any other. You have simply specialized in one of the many arts of consciousness, and that one can be vastly enriched by knowledge and practice of the others. First of all, these organizations do not deal primarily with time at all, but with the emotions and associative processes. When you understand how your own associations work, then you will be in a much better position to interpret your own dreams, for example, and finally, to make an art of them. There are several approaches to these exercises. The idea will be to experience emotions and events as much as possible outside of time sequence. As I have mentioned many times, cellular comprehension deals with probabilities and encompasses future and past. So at that level of activity, time, as you understand it, does not exist. You are not consciously aware of such data, however. The psyche, at the other end of the scale, so to speak, is also free of time. Often, however, your own stream of consciousness leads you to think of events outside their usual order. You may receive a letter from your Aunt Bessie, for example. In a matter of moments, it may trigger you to think of events in your childhood, so that many mental images fly through your mind. You might wonder if your aunt will take an anticipated journey to Europe next year, and that thought might give birth to images of an imagined future. All these thoughts and images will be colored by the emotions that you are connected to the letter. No, all these thoughts and images will be colored by the emotions that are connected to the letter O, and to all the events with which you and your aunt have been involved. The next time you find yourself in the middle of a like experience, with associations flowing freely, then become more aware of what you are doing. Try to sense the mobility involved. You will see that the events will not necessarily be constructed according to the usual time, but according to emotional content. Thoughts of your own next birthday, for instance, may instantly lead you to think of past ones, or a series of birthday pictures may come to mind of your own 12th birthday, your 3rd, your 7th, in an order uniquely your own. That order will be determined by emotional association, the same kind followed by the dreaming self. What did you wear to work 3 days ago? What did you have for breakfast a week ago? Who sat next to you in kindergarten? What frightened you last? Are you afraid of sleep? Did your parents beat you? What did you do just after lunch yesterday? What color shoes did you wear 3 days ago? You remember only significant events or details. Your emotions trigger your memories, and they organize your associations. Your emotions are generated through your beliefs. They attach themselves so that certain beliefs and emotions seem almost synonymous. The next time an opportunity arises, and you recognize the presence of a fairly strong emotion in yourself, let your associations flow. Events and images will spring to mind in an out-of-time context. Some such remembered events will make sense to you. You will clearly see the connection between the emotion and event, but others will not be so obvious. Experience the events as clearly as you can. When you are finished, purposefully alter the sequence. Remember an event and then follow it with a memory of one that actually came earlier. Pretend that the future one came before the past one. Now for another exercise. Imagine a very large painting in which the most important events of your life are clearly depicted. First of all, see them as a series of scenes arranged in small squares to be viewed, as you would say, in a comic book page. The events must be of significance to you. If school graduation meant nothing, for example, do not paint it in. Have the pictures begin in the upper left-hand corner, ending finally in the lower right-hand corner. Then completely switch the sequence so that the earliest events are at the lower right-hand corner. When you have done this, ask yourself, which scene evokes strongest emotional response? Tell yourself that it will become larger and larger, and then mentally watch its size change. Certain dynamics are involved here, so that such a scene will also attract elements from other scenes. Allow those other scenes to break up then. The main picture will attract elements from all the others until you end up with an entirely different picture. One made up of many of the smaller scenes, but united in an entirely new fashion. You must do this exercise, however, for simply reading about it will not give you the experience that comes from the actual exercise. Do it many times. Now, consciously construct a dream. Tell yourself that you're going to do so, and begin with the first thought or image that comes to mind. And when you're finished with your daydream, then use free association to interpret it to yourself. Some of you will meet with some resistance in these exercises. You will enjoy reading about them, but you will find all kinds of excuses that prevent you from trying them yourself. If you are honest, many of you will sense a reluctance, for certain qualities of consciousness are brought into play that run counter to your usual conscious experience. You might feel as if you were crossing your wires, so to speak, or stretching vaguely sensed psychic muscles. The purpose is not so much the perfect execution of such exercises as it is to involve you in a different mode of experience and of awareness that comes into being as you perform in the ways you suggested. You have been taught not to mix, say, waking and dreaming conditions, not to daydream. You have been taught to focus all your attention clearly, ambitiously, energetically, in a particular way. So daydreaming, or mixing and matching modes of consciousness, appears passive, in a derogatory fashion, or non-active, or idle. The devil finds work for idle hands, an old Christian dictum. Unfortunately, certain aspects of Christianity were stressed over others, and that dictum was based upon the belief that in a wicked self that needed to be disciplined and diverted into constructive activity. The belief in such an unsavory self stops many people from any exploration of the inner self, and therefore from any direct experience that will give them counter evidence. If you are afraid of yourself, if you are afraid of your own memories, you will block your associative processes. Fearing, for example, they will bring to light matters best forgotten, and usually sexual matters. Sexuality is the only strong area of energy with which some people are connected. So it becomes the focal point for all of their beliefs about the self in general. In doing some of these exercises, you might come across images of masturbation, homosexual or lesbian encounters, or simply old sexual fantasies, and immediately backtrack because your beliefs may tell you that these are evil. You will not remember or want to remember your own dreams for the same reason. Many people therefore tell themselves that they are very impatient to discover the nature and the extent of the psyche, and cannot understand why they meet with so little success. At the same time, such beliefs convince them that the self is evil. These beliefs must be weeded out. If you cannot honestly encounter the dimensions of your creaturehood, you surely cannot explore the greater dimensions of your psyche. This blocking of associations, however, is a very important element that impedes many people. The psyche's organizations are broader and, in their way, more rational than most of your conscious beliefs about the self. Many individuals are afraid that they will be swept away by inner explorations, that insanity will overtake them, when instead the physical stance of the body and personality is firmly rooted in these alternate organizations. There is nothing wrong with the conscious mind. You have simply put a lid on it, allowing it to be only so conscious and no more. You have said, here it is safe to be conscious, and here it is not. Many of you believe that it is safe to make a nuclear bomb, but that it is insane to use your dreams as another method of manipulating daily life, or that it is all right to be consciously aware of your viruses, wars, and disasters, but that it is not all right to be consciously aware of other portions of the self that could solve such problems. The idea then is not to annihilate normal consciousness, but quite literally to expand it by bringing into its focus other levels of reality that it can indeed intrinsically perceive and utilize. I will suggest many exercises throughout this book. Some of them will necessitate variations of normal consciousness. I may ask you to forget physical stimuli or suggest that you amplify them, but I am nowhere stating that your mode of consciousness is wrong. It is limited, not by nature, but by your own beliefs and practice. You have not carried it far enough. Some night, as you fall asleep, try telling yourself that you will pretend you are awake while you are asleep. Suggest that instead of falling asleep, you will come into another kind of wakefulness. Try to imagine that you are awake when you are asleep. On other occasions, when you go to bed and lie down and settle yourself, but as you fall asleep, imagine that you are awakening the next morning. I will not tell you what to look for. The doing of these exercises is important, not the results in usual terms. I said that there were different kinds of knowledge. So will these exercises bring you in contact with knowledge in another way. Done over a period of time, they will open up alternate modes of perception so that you can view your experience from more than one standpoint. This means that your experience will itself change in quality. Sometimes when you are awake and it is convenient, imagine that your present experience of the moment is a dream and is highly symbolic. Then try to interpret it as such. Who are the people? What do they represent? If an experience were a dream, what would it mean? And into what kind of a waking life would you rise in the morning? The qualities of consciousness cannot be elucidated. These exercises will bring you in contact with other kinds of knowing and acquaint you with different feelings of consciousness that are not familiar. Your consciousness itself will then have a different feel as the exercises are done. Certain questions that you may have asked will be answered in such a state, but not in ways that you can anticipate. Nor can you necessarily translate the answers into known terms. The different modes of consciousness with which I hope to acquaint you are not alien, however. They are quite native, again, in dream states, and are always present as alternatives beneath usual awareness. Sometime, as you walk down a street, pretend that you are seeing the same scene from the sky, in an airplane, yourself included. On another occasion, as you sit inside your house, imagine that you are outside on the lawn or street. All of these exercises should be followed by a return to the present. You focus your attention outward in the present moment as clearly as possible, letting the sounds and the sights of the physical situation come into your attention. The other exercises, in fact, will result in a clearer picture of the world, for they will facilitate the very motion of your perceptions, allowing you to perceive nuances in the physical situation that before would have escaped your notice. We will be dealing with practical, direct experience. It will do you no good if you are simply intellectually aware of what I say, but practically ignorant. Therefore, the exercises will be important because they will offer you evidence of your own greater perceptive abilities. Continue to rely upon known channels of information, but implement these and begin to explore the unrecognized ones also available. What information do you have, for example, presently unknown to yourself? Try your hand at predicting future events. In the beginning, it does not matter whether or not your predictions are true. You will be stretching your consciousness into areas usually unused. Do not put any great stake in your predictions, for if you do, you will be very disappointed if they do not work out and end the entire procedure. If you continue, you will indeed discover that you are aware of some future events. When such knowledge is not available in usual terms. If you persist, then over a period of time, you will discover that you do very well in certain areas, while in others you may fail miserably. There will be associative patterns that you follow successfully, leading towards correct precognitions. You will also discover that the emotions are highly involved in such procedures. You will perceive information that is significant to you for some reason. That significance will act as a magnet, attracting those data to you. Now, in the normal course of events, you attract experience in the same fashion. You anticipate events, you are aware of them before they happen, whether or not you ever succeed in conscious predictions. You form your life, however, through the intimate interworkings of your own conscious goals and beliefs. I'm going to read that sentence again. You form your life, however, through the intimate interworkings of your own conscious goals and beliefs. While your future can, on occasion, be correctly perceived ahead of time by a gifted psychic, the future is too plastic for any kind of systemized framework. Free will is always involved. Yet many people are frightened of remembering dreams because they fear that a dream of disaster will necessarily be followed by such an event. The mobility of consciousness provides far greater freedom. In fact, such a dream can instead be used to circumnavigate such a probability. Only if you understand your own freedom in such areas will you allow yourselves to explore alternate states of consciousness or the environment of dreams. Such exercises are not to be used to supersede the world you know, but to supplement it, to complete it, and to allow you to perceive its true dimensions. There is no need to divorce the waking and dreaming states in the particular fashion that currently operates, for they are complementary states, not opposite ones. A good deal of life's normal dimensions are dependent upon your dream experience. Your entire familiarity with the world of symbols arises directly from the dreaming self. In certain terms, language itself has its root in the dreaming condition, and man dreamed that he spoke long before language was born. He dreamed of flying, and that impetus led to the physical inventions that made mechanical flight possible. I am not speaking symbolically here, but quite literally. From the beginning I said that the self was not confined to the body. This means that the consciousness has other methods of perceiving information, that even in physical life, experience is not confined to what is sensed in usual terms. This remains fine theory, however, unless you allow yourself enough freedom to experiment with other modes of perception. Now, okay, I'm going to pause here. This is actually the end of chapter 3. And my goodness. That was really inspiring, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed it too. And I hope you'll do the exercise. I've done some of them already, but I will try the others as well. Wow. I've read this book before, but I didn't get as much out of it on first reading. But now reading it again, yeah, it really hits a part of me that sees the potential and where I've been stopping myself from exploring other states of consciousness. So if you have any comments, do leave them below. I always enjoy reading comments. And till soon.